This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library of
You can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price that you can get Truefire All Access for.
I think even if some of you guys watching this will not be people who make a living from guitar, you probably have real jobs which make a much more stable income. One of the things that probably pros, semi-pros, just all guitarists have in general that have stuck it out for a while is that you get an enormous amount of enjoyment out of it. And I think we rarely talk about this aspect of stuff until it's a bit too late. And that is hand health. And Jeremy hit me up on Patreon. I do have a Patreon, by the way. If you want to join there, you get backing tracks and tabs and all that stuff. I try and keep it reasonable, £2 a month. Anyway, hit me up and just said, I think we probably, when we're younger, are playing through injuries and, or, we just don't realise we're injured because our body heals in time. And there's a few guys, John as well, Sean, that kind of, watch my stuff regularly and just kind of checked in and just said, how are your hands doing and that sort of thing. And I think it's something we should talk about. I think more often, certainly myself, I've never seen a specialist about any of this stuff, but I've, up to this point, never had to have a day off guitar. And I've kind of wanted to talk about maybe we should just normalise talking about this stuff because I think you don't want to leave it till it's too late to think about your own hand health. the sorts of things that guitarists are going to be likely to encounter are maybe things like repetitive strain injuries, carpal tunnel injuries, all that sort of stuff. Now, for me, anytime I feel like a little bit of something in my hand, and it's not necessarily pain, because I think if it's pain, then you already know that there's definitely something wrong, but like a bit of an ache, or like you feel like there's something, like a little bit of sharpness between two fingers, or a little bit of a dull ache, these kind of things, I tend to go for the ice, stick it in a jug or a bowl like this, and I think that can kind of help. I'm 36 now. The time when I used to feel like there was most sort of issues here, where I used to play piano in a 60s band, and you play like 2 or 3 gigs on the trot doing sort of cowboy wide octave stretches in the left hand, and then, you know, when I go to pick up a guitar, it would feel a little bit strange. At that point, I started taking garlic capsules. Now, I don't know if any of this stuff works, but I can say that I've, up to this point, not had, as I say, a day off, which is probably down to luck as much as anything else. But other things that we don't really think about as guitarists, I guess we should mention, like, what are you doing when you're not playing guitar is a real factor. So, once Elodie was born, I only really ever carry her in this arm. And I did notice that this finger here started to, when she, you know, got to be a certain weight, would have kind of like tingling, numbness and stuff like that. And I think this is a shoulder thing going on. And from doing chin-ups as well, I noticed that shoulder is a bit weird. So that's something that I should probably actually get looked at as well. Then if you think about things like gardening, or maybe if you have like a manual job, even if you have like a job working on a keyboard, that's another thing. I got like an ergonomic mouse so that my wrist position was a bit more or optimal, as well as sort of cushioning to put on the edge of your desk so that you're not crushing your carpal tunnels. It's all little things like this that can help to mitigate stuff. And Sean also pointed out that some of his issues, like he has like tennis elbow stuff, some of his issues come from like a neck problem, and I think John's from like a fall. I've got a buddy as well who's got neck issues from a fall, and sometimes a neck issue can sort of come out in your hands. So it's all a little bit of sort of bad luck type stuff that can affect this, and trying to mitigate these things before it's too late. And I guess if there's any of you guys watching in your 30s, I think Justin as well, you're slightly younger but are facing some of these things. I think Justin's are sort of muscular here, and he's like had massages and stuff like that. And John also pointed out there's like a massage gun that you can massage your palms with, and that might be a great idea too. Blue, you jumped in and kind of suggested like this, but going between cold and then, you know, really warm or really hot water. All these things are good. I also think just exercise in general, one of the things, because I've had this V thing with the Nacho where it's like, actually my hand's not feeling ideal. It happens to now have coincided with my wife saying I want to do like couch to 5k, and it's kind of reminded me that I've kind of neglected just general exercise in a while as well. And I had another Patreon guy, I think Andrew, who jumped in and said, you know, grip strength, have you thought about that? When, you know, because I thought that this left hand thing might have been from carrying a plastic bag kind of like this, trying to get it to close up whilst I was also carrying Elodie. All these things to think about, like, are you doing some exercise? Are you do some stretches? I remember, Steve, you jumped in. I had sort of back problems during the pandemic where I'd been sat down streaming for a lot and not really paying attention to getting out and walking about. So I think it's one of those things where there are a few things that we should be thinking about, like regularly icing your hands, I guess, is a really just straightforward idea that might help. It might not do a ton, but it can maybe help to stave off some things and get something happening. I try to do like the end of every shower, make it cold, which in winter is a real thing, but you know, in summer it's actually quite nice. I take garlic capsules. I think Justin said like oregano stuff. You know, I don't do anything particularly crazy like drinking or smoking or anything like that, but I'm sure those things don't necessarily help too much with this sort of stuff. The other thing that I think is maybe we should consider having like a rest set of strings. So if you're feeling like a bit of fatigue, I know we don't normally consider this, just like I'm a 10s or I'm 11s guy, I'm not going to make that joke, but in terms of strings, like I was chatting to my buddy Will last night, and he's just put a set of 11s on his guitar, and he's remembering a time that he tried a guitar in Project Music with 10s on it, and it was like, it felt so slinky, and the tension was, you know, effortless and that sort of stuff. I think maybe if there's like a long string of gigs, or maybe if you're feeling something in your hand, considering jumping down a string gauge or even half a string gauge. I think D'Addario do half string gauges and a bunch of others do. That's not a bad idea at all. Just giving your hand a little bit of a break, even if you don't stop playing altogether, playing with reduced tension, or just tune down a step or half a step down to E flat. I think there's lots of things like this that we don't really talk about until generally like it's catastrophic, where it's like, well, you've already done like permanent damage. And that's what these guys that are maybe slightly older and wiser than me have been telling me, like, just watch out for this stuff, be on the lookout. So I thought it was important to maybe sort of try and amplify that message, particularly as I'm in my 30s, but as you get older, I just think it's these things that we need to just start to think about. And if any of you guys are also in the same boat, you know, I've got a younger buddy who's, you know, the same time as me, who's just feels like my carpal tunnel's hurting. His girlfriend showed him some hand exercises to do and like warm-ups. And again, it's things that in your 20s and 30s you don't really think about until, you know, till there's a problem. And maybe we should be just working these into our lives a bit better. This is now no longer cold, so that means it's time for me to stop making the video. Just thinking, right, well, what's going on in my lifestyle? Are there other things that are going on with my hand that I need to consider? And that's something I'm quite thankful about with this Nacho experience, because it's kind of reinforced that, you know, sometimes certain specs on a guitar are going to maybe highlight some things that are going on, but also maybe our hands and our arms and our technique grows around a certain type of neck and a certain type of, you know, variables. And if you throw like a V-neck into the mix straight away, maybe you could expect some discomfort if this becomes like the guitar that you're playing all the time. But equally, are there other things that you could get in check in your life as well? And that's just like a little reminder, like, are you doing kind of regular exercise? Are you making sure, you know, like your neck is aligned properly whilst you're sleeping? All these kind of things that maybe we don't think about too much. Have you done loads of long drives? You know, have you been using your hands in the garden and stuff like that? Just, yeah, I think we should try and think about it a little bit more rather than drive pedals sometimes. And maybe even see a specialist if you've got an ongoing problem, which is luckily not something that I've ever had. Like, as soon as I switched to C necks again, I was feeling like the hand felt better. And now I feel like maybe my hand is compensating for another part. But it's just something I'm going to be aware of and continue to try and pay attention to this kind of stuff. If you've got resources for this sort of stuff, then I don't think YouTube will let you link them in the comments, but please feel free to point people in the direction of stuff that has helped you. And, you know, stay